Good morning, this is Pops. No, it's not morning. It's just afternoon. I do believe this is October 1st. It sure is. At 12:02 p.m. now. Anyway, I figured I'd get on here and I'm going to have to put the label on here for Neway Manufacturing. Linda up front in sales and such was so darn helpful today. I figured I'd come on here and let you know. Neway Manufacturing that I use is the seat cutter kit. Valve seats for cutting valve seats, and they have machines like the Gizmatic for but they got a fancy name for the other thing too. But the Gizmatic has a 30 degree and a 45 degree cutter kit where you can hand cut valves in a vise accurately. Now I haven't put in a dial indicator on one. However, I've cut probably a dozen valves with the thing, diesel valves, small engine valves, and others. And there's no collets or anything else. It actually has a V block built into the system, and the valve itself centers it. Yeah, here's the cute part. It holds the stem, and if you set it up properly, there's a little advancement tool, ring on it. And as you turn, you turn the little knob to advance it upwards into the valve, the cutters. And if you do it slowly and carefully, it centers itself. It can't miss. You say, no, wait a minute. No, because it touches on the part of the valve that never touches the seat unless you've destroyed the valve and seat completely. So is it 100%? No. But it's in the 90% plus range that this thing's going to work excellent for you. Now, the cutters, they don't have hard valve face cutters. So you end up replacing them a little more often than you'd like. But at the same time, for most standard valves, and you're just doing a few things, or even at home for $400, $500, it's a beautiful kit. I bought mine years ago, and I used it on a couple of Hat's diesel engines. The exhaust valves ate the cutters up after about 3 or 4 valves. And they're not that expensive, so I can't give you an exact price. But anyway, they weren't that expensive. I ordered more. I got a set that came in for it now, and they were still cutting because where the valve seat, they're tapered, so you can move the cutters up and down and cut them in a different location. So even if you dull them on this valve, you can still move them enough to cut on another valve area in most cases. So, and it'll cut a big dang valve too. Doesn't need to, but it does. So the Gizmatic's been great. They have a valve turning tool. That's a big old thing for your seat cutters you put on your Pilot. You're going to cut your valve seat and you're sitting there with a T-handle. No. Spend the money. They got a doodad that drops on there. It's spring loaded so you can control some of the pressure, but you can't just jam down hard on it without really working at it. So you can just turn it nice and lightly or give it a little spring pressure on the sleeve and turn the knob. Excuse me. Because you can turn continuously, you get a much better surface than the T-handle. And the T-handle's been used for generations. Well, why am I talking to you about all this? Well, if you're at home monkeying around with this, you can buy the valve cutters, the seat cutters you want, the Pilots you want, the Gizmatic, the turning tool, the T-handle, Pilots, all of it for what? Under $1,000? And you say, well, yeah, but no, the average valve job in headwork anymore is $1,000 plus. $500 is common for a 2-cylinder John Deere, a little one like an M or a 40. So now what is it for a 4-cylinder and a diesel? So I'm just saying, if you have the actual acumen to do this, the skills and in some cases talent, but in this case just good skills and a smart head, I mean, you don't need much of an IQ to use it properly if you know how to read a book and follow instructions and get those valve guides cleaned or replaced. The things work great. They have expanding pilots. They have tapered pilots. They got more pilots than anything that you can imagine. And they're with the 3/8 top, which is the most common. So you can use these pilots if you have a valve seat grinder kit or one that you can get inexpensively, say off of eBay. I mean, this thing is, what do the youngins call it? Da bomb? Yeah. They do very well. Same thing, you have to replace cutters. What do you do with your stones? You have to keep truing the stones up. You chew your stones up. So if you're doing this Neway, I'd go to Neway in a heartbeat. I've used them for years. Excuse me. In fact, recently I used them and I ended up with one valve because I use a hand vacuum pump to test the buggers. We never used to do that before. Bang it against the seat, you got a seat, ship it. It's going to be fine. I had one that I know would have been fine. But I vacuum tested it and said, that's odd. Doesn't hold like the others. And I took a look, and microscopic pits that I really had to get down there with a magnifying glass and see that I had missed when I cut the seat. Had a perfect ring around it. They were so small you couldn't see the imperfection. Because most guys spin the valve. I don't. I just bang it straight against the seat. But even then, a couple of taps and slaps just to see it. And you're going to move the valve and miss these tiny little... I mean, we're talking things that are about 5 thousandths. And that's all it took to cause a vacuum leak. Recut the seat, put the valve on again, vacuum test, perfect. So, and if you watch some of these other guys, what is it, Powell Engineering there? You'll watch him use old-fashioned grinders on the seats, on racing stuff. And almost never do a full valve job. Why? Because it doesn't need it. That's low hour, high horsepower, but low hour type. My stuff is high hour, even the small engine, high hour. And for the small engine stuff, I highly recommend this. Oh my goodness, you do any small engine work at all? Get the full kit. Yeah, it's going to cost you money. And get the turn tool. And get your gizmatic. Have it all done there. It's getting hard to find the old valves for these things. I have 2 Tecumseh engines, and one of them I cannot find an exhaust valve for. I'm going to have to keep searching. I know they're out there. But most likely, with the gizmatic, I'll be able to cut it now. But I also have the, what do they call it? The VFR 1000. That's a valve face resurfacer. Should have called it the VRF, but they didn't. Valve refacer. But anyway, the VFR 1000, and that's a tool cutter, and I can cut them as well. And that is a collet machine and does an excellent job as well. Small, teeny little thing. Cast aluminum base, and it's still heavy. I mean, that block that holds the valve for the angle, and yeah, it's solid. Solid stuff. Plus you have collets. So it has been very, very good. That's another one. The cutters are a little more expensive on this one, but they're 3 points. So you pay $35 for a cutter that has 3 points. So essentially, what are you talking? You know, a little over $10 a corner. $12 a corner. So if you go back to some of the other cutters, they're $10, $12, $15 a piece for an individual cutter. So it pans out, and they do a very nice job. When you get done, here's something I watched. What is it? Josh there at I Do Airflow or something like that. But anyway, I watched Josh put some valves in a drill, and he was checking them for run out and reusing them without refacing to try and keep as much metal on there as possible for a racing head. Took a 3M pad and ran was it a 3M pad? I think it was. Spun it in a drill and hit the head of the valve and the face, the seat face, and cleaned up a perfectly beautiful. You know why it warms me and why I'm reminding you? Because when I get done with my Neway, the cutter goes across there and does a beautiful face. When I get it where I like it, and it's fully faced, I take a 3M maroon pad. Done. Beautiful. Right now I have gray, maroon, and green. And the maroon seems to be the best in general, but the gray is a little finer, and that puts a sweet surface on them. So, you know, what you think is commonplace, cheap, and cheesy, no. And the funny thing is watching the racing guys do some of this stuff and come out where I used to be a lot more critical about some of that stuff, getting it done right, but then again, mine was longevity. Theirs is racing. The seal is more important on the valve than having meat on the valve to handle the high horsepower hammering, your guides and everything else. He was going on about titanium valves and the coating, and they have to be recoated. And that's one of the reasons he was cleaning the valves up and checking the run out rather than refacing. A lot of stuff that we wouldn't even take a second thought. Longevity, out the window. Get a new one. Or just reface it and put it back in. Well, the Neway stuff does work very, very well. I mean, I've used the seat pocket cutter, the seat cutters themselves, and the seat pocket cutter for 30 years. Not continuously. There's a long time that it sat in the shelf. But I used it back in the 90s when I was running my engine machine shop, and that was eight years or so. And so, well, that's cheesy. Well, there was a lot of guys that didn't want to pay the big bill to go over the hill to have the fancy machines used that were 30 years old, and those machines were not serviced properly or correctly. They didn't sharpen their cutters, they didn't replace the cutters, and then they used a broach that they were not very critical about setting. The broach made a rough surface. I had a platen sander that people say you can't use. If used properly, my platen sander beat almost every surface finish in the region. But you have to be careful. If you are careful at home, there's a lot of equipment that you can use that will get you, not just get you by, get you serviced well, have an engine running and overhauled, say for an antique tractor or a farm tractor at home. So, and for small engine stuff, yeah, there's some of those things I'm going to need to find a way to get a small lathe or a mill lathe combination, something to do some other work. But I'm retired and I can't just plain sock the money out there. Because I retired due to injuries. No, not even an injury. It's an injury by wearing out. When your knee is shot, so that your other knee is starting to complain and your back's been howling for the last 20 years. And my bride says, I think it's time for a knee replacement and for you to retire. So, then in this economy, it's not very good. But anyway, my recommendation is if you're considering Neway valve seat cutters, and if you look at it, they can get you certain kits. But if you know what you need and you're careful, your pilots, when they're tapered, they come in standard 1, 2, and 3 under, and 1, 2, and 3, and sometimes higher over, and you can special order some of those things. They'll machine it there. They will, as far as I know. They told me, call us with what you need. We can turn it out. They're set up for it. That's another one that you can go to. And I was talking to her about a John Deere D with 5/8 valve guides, and she says, well, we have an expandable one that'll fit that directly. And I said, if I'd have looked and known, I'd ordered that years ago. Because the John Deere D is big, mammoth. Nobody had do anything with the valves. It was just me. In all of New York State, nobody had anything for 2.5 inch or 2 3/4 D John Deere valve. It was a 30 degree. Yeah, it was for racing stuff, yeah. But not for a big, heavy diesel. That was cool. Was it diesel or gas? No, the D was gas, I believe. But monstrosity. I think the intake was, no, they were both the same, I think. 2.5 to 2 3/4, someplace in there. But a 5/8 valve guide? I had a neighbor, machinist, build me a sleeve. I can put the sleeve down in there. I should have had him put a shoulder on it. I didn't think about that, but I can do that with O-ring or snap ring. Drop that down in there and put a regular old 1/2 inch or 3/8. I can't remember if it was 1/2 inch or 3/8. I think it was 3/8. Guide pilot in to the sleeve. And the sleeve is slotted so it expands and holds. He put a slight 1 or 2 thousandths taper on it. I think 1. So I was set. Worked on the D, and I was the only one anywhere that they called around that would even touch it. I laughed. The other part of it was, if I remember correctly, I think I was the only one that could resurface it too. They couldn't get it in their machine cutters, but I could just get it on my platen sander if I remember correctly. I might be wrong on that though. But there are a lot of things that you can do carefully and come away with, but I doubt that John Deere head needed much resurfacing. When they start getting that big and that much cast iron, they tend to hold. That, and then the thing's only rated like 40 horsepower or something on a monstrous 478 or 500 and something cubic inch engine. Oh. Don't. Wide open, 1100 RPM or something. Anyway, so I called Linda, and she took excellent care of me, went out and actually looked at some of the stock, fought for about 10 minutes looking up to get a proper price and to tell me what they had, because they have some old stock that's been there a long time, and man, there's some of it I'm going to have to order later on to be sure I have enough. Look, I plan on doing this stuff until I'm in my 80s easily. So I got another 20 years with this. And so I'm trying to plan a little bit ahead, get things in, because when they get through with this world over-regulating everything, a company like Neway is going to have to make some changes or end up going out of business. And to be honest, with the service that they give, I hope Neway stays in business doing something forever. If nothing else, if they have to close down their machine operations, which I hope they never do, then they ought to at least this time diversify and give training and customer service, because nobody else is better than Neway Manufacturing.